The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty training ground as Sarah Chen adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that day. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each movement calculated and deliberate. Around her, the sounds of military training filled the air, shouting instructors, the rhythmic thud of boots on gravel, and the distant crack of gunfire from other ranges. Sarah had been at this base for 3 months now, and, still, she felt like an outsider looking in. The other recruits barely acknowledged her presence, and, when they did, it was usually with skeptical glances or whispered comments they thought she couldn't hear. She had grown accustomed to being underestimated, but it never stopped stinging. The shooting instructor, Sergeant Martinez, approached her position with his usual stern expression. He was a weathered man in his 40s, with scars that told stories of multiple deployments and countless battles. His reputation preceded him. He was known for breaking down recruits who thought they were tougher than they actually were. "Chen," he barked, stopping directly behind her. "You're up for qualification today. You know what that means." Sarah nodded without turning around. She knew exactly what it meant. Today would determine whether she advanced to the next phase of sniper training or was sent back to regular infantry. The pressure had been building for weeks, and she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations, or rather, their hope that she would fail. She had grown up in a small town in Oregon, where her father had taught her to hunt from the age of 8. He was a quiet man who believed in showing rather than telling, and he had shown her how to read the wind, how to control her breathing, and how to find that perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats when the shot would be true. Her father never made a big deal about her being a girl with a rifle. To him, shooting was about patience, discipline, and respect for the weapon. Gender never entered the equation. But the military was different. Here, everything was about proving yourself, and, for a woman, that bar seemed impossibly high. Sarah had excelled in every aspect of her training so far, but she knew that one bad day, one missed shot, could undo months of hard work. "Target is at 800 meters, Martinez announced, loud enough for the other recruits to hear. "Wind is coming from the southeast at approximately 10 miles per hour. You have 3 shots to prove you belong here." Sarah settled into her firing position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment, blocking out the whispers and comments from the other recruits who had gathered to watch. This was her moment, and she wouldn't let anyone else's doubts creep into her mind. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly, a standard military silhouette at what most people would consider an impossible distance for accurate shooting. But Sarah had been making shots like this since she was 15 years old, helping her father hunt elk in the mountains of Oregon. The only difference now was that everyone was watching, and the stakes were higher than they had ever been. She controlled her breathing, just as her father had taught her. In through the nose, hold for a count of 3, out through the mouth. With each exhale, her body became more relaxed, more stable. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, finding that rhythm that would give her the perfect moment to fire. The wind was tricky today, gusting and changing direction slightly every few seconds. Sarah watched the flags around the range, noting how they moved, calculating the adjustments she would need to make. Her father had always said that the best hunters were the ones who could read nature, who could become part of the environment rather than fighting against it. Her first shot rang out across the range, the sound echoing off the surrounding hills. Through her scope, she watched as the bullet found its mark, hitting just left of center mass. It was a good shot, but not perfect. She could hear Martinez grunt behind her, whether in approval or disappointment, she couldn't tell. The second shot was better. She had adjusted for the wind drift and put the bullet exactly where she wanted it. Center mass, textbook placement. Around her, she could hear the murmur of conversation from the other recruits, their skepticism beginning to waver. For her third shot, Sarah took her time. This wasn't just about qualification anymore, this was about making a statement. She wanted everyone watching to understand that she wasn't here by accident, that she had earned her place through skill and dedication, not through any special treatment or lowered standards. She adjusted her scope minutely, accounting for a slight shift in the wind direction. Her breathing slowed even further, and she found that perfect moment of stillness that her father had taught her to recognize. The trigger squeeze was smooth and controlled, and she knew even before the bullet reached its target that it was a perfect shot. The bullet struck dead center, and, for a moment, the range was completely silent. Then, Martinez's voice cut through the quiet. "Outstanding shot, Chen. That's the kind of accuracy we expect from our snipers." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she began to pack up her equipment. She had passed the qualification, but, more importantly, she had begun to earn the respect of her peers. It was a small step, but it was progress. Over the next few weeks, her training intensified. The physical demands were enormous: long hikes with full equipment, endless hours of camouflage and concealment training, and constant practice with different weapons systems. Sarah threw herself into every aspect of the training, determined to prove that she belonged. The other recruits began to take notice. Tom Bradley, a former college football player from Texas, was the first to approach her after a particularly grueling day of field exercises. He was big and imposing, the kind of person who was used to being the strongest person in any room. But he had also been watching Sarah's performance, and he couldn't deny what he was seeing. "That was some solid shooting today," he said as they cleaned their weapons in the armory. "Where did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" "My father taught me," Sarah replied simply. She had learned that the best way to handle questions about her background was to keep her answers short and factual. Too much information often led to more questions, and she preferred to let her performance speak for itself. "He must have been a hell of a teacher," Tom said. "I grew up hunting too, but I've never seen anyone read the wind the way you do." It was a small gesture, but it meant more to Sarah than Tom probably realized. Recognition from her peers was something she had been working toward since the day she arrived, and, slowly, it was beginning to happen. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah's reputation grew. She consistently outperformed her peers in marksmanship, and her scores on written exams were among the highest in the class. She was methodical in her approach to everything, whether it was cleaning her weapon, studying tactical manuals, or planning reconnaissance missions. But it wasn't just her technical skills that set her apart. Sarah had a way of seeing details that others missed, of finding patterns and connections that weren't obvious at first glance. During camouflage exercises, she could blend into terrain so effectively that instructors would walk within feet of her position without detecting her presence. Her patience was extraordinary. She could remain motionless for hours, watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity. Sergeant Martinez began to take special notice of her abilities. He was a man who had seen countless recruits come and go, and he knew talent when he saw it. More importantly, he recognized the kind of mental toughness that separated good soldiers from exceptional ones. "Chen," he called her aside one afternoon after a particularly challenging field exercise. "I want to talk to you about your future." They walked to a quiet area away from the other recruits, and Martinez turned to face her directly. His expression was serious, but she could see something like respect in his eyes. "You're performing at a level that's unusual for someone at your stage of training," he said. "Your shooting scores are consistently in the top percentile, your fieldcraft is excellent, and you've shown the kind of mental discipline that we look for in our best snipers." Sarah listened without interrupting, unsure where the conversation was heading. "There's an opportunity coming up," Martinez continued. "A chance to work with some of the most elite units in the military. But it would mean additional training, longer deployments, and a level of responsibility that most soldiers never experience. Are you interested?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Yes, Sergeant. I'm interested." "Good," Martinez said with a slight smile. "Because I'm recommending you for advanced sniper school. If you pass, you'll be eligible for assignments with special operations units. But I want you to understand what you're signing up for. The training is going to make everything you've done so far look easy. The failure rate is high, and the standards are unforgiving." "I understand, Sergeant." "I believe you do," Martinez replied. "And I believe you have what it takes to succeed. But belief isn't enough. You're going to have to prove it every single day." That night, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the conversation. Advanced Sniper School represented everything she had been working towards since she joined the military. It was a chance to push herself to the absolute limits of her abilities and to serve in a capacity where her skills could make a real difference. But she also understood the reality of what lay ahead. Advanced training would be more demanding than anything she had experienced so far. The other candidates would be seasoned soldiers with years of experience and proven track records. She would once again be the outsider, the one who had to prove herself worthy of being there. The thought didn't intimidate her. If anything, it motivated her. She had spent her entire life being underestimated, and she had learned to use that to her advantage. People who didn't expect much from her were often unprepared for her actual capabilities. Her father had taught her that hunting wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest, it was about being the smartest, the most patient, and the most prepared. Those lessons had served her well in military training, and she knew they would serve her well in whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Sarah began preparing for the next phase of her journey. She increased her physical training, spending extra hours in the gym and on running trails. She studied tactical manuals and military history, absorbing every piece of information that might give her an advantage. Most importantly, she continued to hone her shooting skills, pushing herself to achieve levels of accuracy that bordered on perfection. Her fellow recruits began to take notice of her intensified preparation, and word spread quickly about her recommendation for advanced training. Some were supportive, recognizing her abilities and wishing her well. Others were skeptical, questioning whether she was truly ready for such an elite program. Sarah ignored both the praise and the criticism. She had learned long ago that the only opinion that truly mattered was her own assessment of her abilities and her commitment to constant improvement. External validation was nice when it came, but it wasn't something she relied on for motivation. 3 weeks later, she received her official orders. She would report to the Advanced Sniper School at Fort Benning, Georgia, in 6 weeks. The intervening time would be spent completing her current training cycle and preparing for the challenges ahead. As she read through the paperwork, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and determination. This was the opportunity she had been working toward, the chance to prove that she belonged among the military's elite marksmen. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready for whatever challenges awaited her. The day before her departure, Sergeant Martinez pulled her aside for one final conversation. They stood on the same range where she had first proven her marksmanship skills months earlier, and Martinez looked out across the targets with a thoughtful expression. "You've come a long way since that first qualification day," he said. "But the real test is just beginning. Advanced Sniper School will push you harder than you've ever been pushed before. You'll question whether you belong there, whether you have what it takes to succeed." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "When that happens," Martinez continued, "remember why you're there. Remember that you earned your place through dedication and skill. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong, because you do. You have the potential to be one of the best snipers this military has ever produced." "Thank you, Sergeant," Sarah said, genuinely moved by his confidence in her abilities. "Don't thank me yet," Martinez replied with a grin. "Thank me when you graduate at the top of your class." As Sarah packed her belongings that evening, she reflected on how much had changed since she first arrived at the base. She was no longer the unknown quantity that others viewed with suspicion. She had proven her capabilities and earned the respect of her instructors and peers. But she knew that everything she had accomplished so far was just preparation for the real challenges ahead. Advanced Sniper School would test every aspect of her training, her marksmanship, her physical endurance, her mental toughness, and her ability to perform under pressure. She would be competing against some of the most skilled soldiers in the military, and there would be no room for error. But Sarah was ready. She had spent years preparing for this moment, first with her father in the mountains of Oregon, and then through months of intensive military training. She had learned to trust her abilities and to perform at her best when the stakes were highest. As she closed her eyes that final night, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Every challenge, every setback, every small victory had been building toward this opportunity. Tomorrow, she would begin the next chapter of that journey, one that would ultimately lead her to become one of the most respected snipers in the United States military. Fort Benning stretched out before Sarah like a small city dedicated entirely to the art of warfare. The Advanced Sniper School occupied a section of the massive base, where the most demanding marksmanship training in the world took place. As she walked through the gates carrying her duffel bag, Sarah could feel the weight of history around her. This was where legends were made, where ordinary soldiers were transformed into precision instruments of military power. The first person she encountered was Master Sergeant Williams, a man whose reputation preceded him by several thousand miles. He was tall and lean, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of countless hours spent in harsh environments, waiting for the perfect shot. His eyes were pale gray, and, when he looked at Sarah, she felt as though he could see straight through to her core. "Chen," he said, consulting a clipboard. "Welcome to hell." The barracks were austere, containing only the basic necessities. Sarah's bunk was one of 20 in a long, narrow room where she would spend the next 6 months alongside 19 other candidates. As she unpacked her belongings, she took stock of her fellow students. They were all seasoned soldiers, most with multiple deployments under their belts. Their ages ranged from mid-20s to early 40s, and every one of them carried themselves with the confidence of someone who had already proven themselves in combat. The candidate in the bunk next to hers introduced himself as Staff Sergeant Rick Morrison from the 75th Ranger Regiment. He was a compact man with intense dark eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years handling weapons and equipment. His uniform bore the patches and ribbons of someone who had seen significant action overseas. First time at Benning, he asked as Sarah organized her gear. First time at advanced school, she replied. You? Second try, Morrison admitted without embarrassment. Didn't make it through the first time. Stress got to me during the final evaluation. That's not going to happen again. Sarah appreciated his honesty. It reminded her that even experienced soldiers could struggle with the demands of elite training. She filed away the information about stress during final evaluations, making a mental note to prepare herself for whatever psychological pressure awaited her. Over the next few days, Sarah began to understand the true scope of what she had undertaken. Advanced Sniper School was unlike any training she had experienced before. Every aspect of the program was designed to push candidates beyond their perceived limits, to find the breaking point where lesser soldiers would quit. The physical demands were extraordinary. Each day began at 4:30 in the morning with a 5-mile run in full gear, followed by calisthenics and weapons maintenance. The academic requirements were equally challenging, with detailed instruction in ballistics, meteorology, range estimation, and tactical employment. But it was the psychological pressure that truly set the program apart. Master Sergeant Williams seemed to take special pleasure in creating scenarios designed to test the mental resilience of his students. During one exercise, Sarah found herself lying prone in a muddy field for 8 hours, maintaining surveillance on a target while instructors periodically fired blanks near her position to test her concentration. The slightest movement or loss of focus resulted in immediate failure and dismissal from the exercise. The enemy doesn't care about your comfort, Williams explained to the class afterward. When you're deployed, you might spend days in position, waiting for your target to appear. If you can't handle discomfort, if you can't maintain absolute concentration under stress, then you don't belong here. Sarah excelled in the marksmanship portions of the training, consistently achieving some of the highest scores in the class. Her ability to read environmental conditions and make precise adjustments was noticed not only by the instructors but also by her fellow students. But she struggled with some of the physical challenges, particularly the long-distance land navigation exercises that required carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. During one particularly brutal navigation exercise, Sarah found herself falling behind the rest of the group as they traversed a series of steep hills in the Georgia wilderness. Her pack weighed nearly 80 pounds, filled with a complete sniper system, ammunition, water, and survival gear. The pace was relentless, and she could feel her energy reserves depleting rapidly. Morrison, who had been maintaining a steady pace near the front of the group, noticed her struggling and dropped back to walk alongside her. At first, Sarah felt a flash of pride-driven irritation. She didn't want special treatment or pity from her classmates. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth as they climbed another steep incline. "Never said you weren't," Morrison replied easily. "But we're a team here. We succeed together or we fail together." He began talking about his own experiences during his first attempt at sniper school, sharing stories about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. His conversation was casual, but Sarah realized that his steady pace was helping her maintain her rhythm. Without making a big show of it, he was providing the kind of subtle support that allowed her to push through the physical challenge without losing face. They completed the exercise as a group, and Williams noted approvingly that everyone had finished within the acceptable time parameters. But Sarah understood that the real lesson wasn't about navigation or physical endurance, it was about the importance of teamwork and mutual support under pressure. As the weeks progressed, Sarah found her place within the group dynamic. Her marksmanship skills earned respect, but it was her analytical mind and attention to detail that truly set her apart. During mission planning exercises, she consistently identified factors that others overlooked, whether it was wind patterns, concealment opportunities, or potential escape routes. One morning, Williams announced that they would be conducting urban sniper training in a mock city constructed on the base. The scenario involved providing overwatch for a simulated raid on a terrorist safe house. Each student would be assigned a position and tasked with identifying threats while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Sarah was assigned to a building approximately 400 meters from the target structure. Her position offered excellent visibility of the target area, but it also presented significant challenges in terms of concealment and escape routes. She spent the better part of an hour studying the environment, identifying the best firing positions and planning multiple exit strategies. The exercise began at dawn, with Sarah lying concealed in a third-floor window, her rifle trained on the target building. Through her scope, she watched as role-playing instructors moved through the structure, some designated as hostages, others as enemy combatants. Her job was to provide accurate intelligence to the assault team while being prepared to engage hostile targets if necessary. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. Sarah maintained her position, fighting off fatigue and boredom while continuing to observe the target. This was the kind of patience that separated professional snipers from average marksmen, the ability to remain alert and focused during long periods of inactivity. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Through her scope, Sarah spotted movement on the roof of the target building. An instructor portraying an enemy sniper was moving into position, preparing to engage the approaching assault team. He was well concealed and had chosen his position carefully, but Sarah had been watching the building long enough to notice the subtle change in shadows that indicated his presence. She keyed her radio and transmitted the threat information to the assault team leader, providing precise details about the enemy sniper's position and recommended approach routes to avoid his field of fire. Her information allowed the assault team to neutralize the threat before beginning their breach of the building. The exercise continued for another hour, with Sarah providing continuous overwatch and intelligence updates. When it concluded, Williams gathered the entire class for debriefing. "Chen," he said, addressing Sarah directly. "You spotted that rooftop position before anyone else, including the instructors who were specifically looking for it. How did you identify the threat so quickly?" "I had been watching the building for over 2 hours, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "I knew what normal looked like, so when something changed, it was obvious." Williams nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. Most people look for what they expect to see. Professional snipers learn to see what's actually there. The difference between those two things can mean the difference between mission success and mission failure." That afternoon, Sarah noticed a change in how her classmates interacted with her. The respect had always been there, based on her shooting abilities, but now there was something deeper, recognition of her tactical acumen and professional competence. She was no longer the unknown quantity trying to prove herself, she was an integral part of the team. The training intensified as they moved into the advanced phases of the course. Sarah found herself participating in complex scenarios that tested every aspect of her skills. She learned to operate as part of a sniper team, working with a spotter to engage multiple targets at extended range. She practiced urban concealment techniques, learning to blend into city environments where traditional camouflage was useless. One of the most challenging aspects of the training was the psychological evaluation component. Students were subjected to stress tests designed to determine how they would perform under extreme pressure. Sleep deprivation, sensory overload, and constant harassment from instructors were used to push candidates to their breaking points. During one particularly grueling week, Sarah went 3 days with only a few hours of sleep, while being required to perform complex calculations, maintain weapons, and execute precision shooting under constantly changing conditions. The instructors seemed to take special interest in testing her limits, perhaps because of her gender, or perhaps because her performance had marked her as someone with exceptional potential. By the 4th day, Sarah was operating purely on willpower and muscle memory. Her hands shook slightly from exhaustion, and her vision occasionally blurred from fatigue. But, when she stepped up to the firing line for her daily marksmanship evaluation, everything else faded away. The years of training with her father, the months of military instruction, and her own natural ability combined to produce shots that were still hitting their marks with deadly accuracy. Williams watched her performance with the kind of professional interest that Sarah had learned to recognize. After she completed her shooting sequence, he approached her position with a slight smile on his weathered face. "How are you feeling, Chen?" he asked. "Ready for the next challenge, Sergeant," she replied, even though her entire body ached with fatigue. "Good answer," Williams said. "Because the real test starts now." The final phase of sniper school was a comprehensive field exercise that would last for 2 weeks. Students were divided into teams and given a series of increasingly complex missions to complete. They would operate in a simulated combat environment, complete with opposing forces trying to hunt them down and eliminate them from the exercise. Sarah was partnered with Morrison for the final exercise. Their first mission was to infiltrate a defended area, establish a concealed observation post, and gather intelligence on enemy movements for 48 hours without being detected. It sounded simple in theory, but Sarah knew that the instructors would be doing everything possible to make their lives difficult. They began their infiltration at midnight, moving through dense forest terrain while carrying all the equipment they would need for the extended mission. The weight was significant, but Sarah had learned to manage her load effectively, distributing the weight in a way that minimized fatigue and maximized mobility. After 4 hours of careful movement, they reached their designated area and began searching for a suitable observation post. The terrain was challenging, with limited concealment options and multiple avenues of approach that opposing forces could use to detect their position. Morrison suggested a location on a ridgeline that offered excellent visibility but limited concealment. Sarah studied the position carefully before shaking her head. "Too exposed," she said quietly. "The background doesn't break up our silhouette effectively, and there's only one escape route if we're compromised." She pointed to an alternative position in a small depression surrounded by dense vegetation. It offered almost as good visibility as the ridgeline position, but with multiple concealment options and several potential escape routes. "That's going to be a much more difficult shot if we need to engage targets," Morrison pointed out. "Better a difficult shot than a dead sniper," Sarah replied pragmatically. They established their observation post in the depression, carefully arranging their equipment and camouflage to minimize their signature. For the next 48 hours, they maintained continuous surveillance of the target area, documenting enemy movements and transmitting intelligence reports at scheduled intervals. The instructors made multiple attempts to locate their position, using both ground searches and aerial reconnaissance. Sarah and Morrison remained undetected throughout the entire exercise, while providing detailed and accurate intelligence that would have been invaluable to any military commander. When the exercise concluded, Williams personally came to their position to conduct the debrief. He studied their concealment techniques and equipment placement with the eye of a professional who had spent decades in similar positions around the world. "Outstanding fieldcraft," he said simply. "You chose your position well and executed your mission flawlessly." The final week of sniper school consisted of comprehensive testing in all areas of instruction. Written examinations covered everything from ballistics calculations to military tactics. Physical fitness tests pushed students to demonstrate their endurance and strength under pressure. And practical exercises required them to demonstrate mastery of all the skills they had learned over the previous months. Sarah approached each test with the same methodical preparation that had carried her through the entire program. She studied until she could recite ballistics formulas from memory. She maintained her physical training regimen despite the fatigue that accumulated from months of intensive instruction. And she practiced her marksmanship until her shots were hitting targets with machine-like precision. The final practical examination was a complex scenario that combined all aspects of sniper operations. Students were required to infiltrate an area, establish an observation post, gather intelligence, and engage multiple targets while avoiding detection by opposing forces. The exercise lasted for 72 hours, and failure at any point resulted in immediate dismissal from the program. Sarah and Morrison worked together with the seamless coordination they had developed over months of partnership. They infiltrated their assigned area without detection, established a concealed position that offered excellent visibility of the target area, and began their surveillance mission. Over the course of 3 days, they encountered every challenge the instructors could devise. They were subjected to intensive searches by ground forces, aerial reconnaissance, and even psychological pressure in the form of propaganda broadcasts designed to break their concentration. When targets finally appeared in their sector, Sarah engaged them with the kind of precision that had become her trademark. 5 shots at ranges between 600 and 800 meters, and 5 hits exactly where they needed to be. Morrison provided spotting assistance and security, creating the kind of professional partnership that was the hallmark of elite sniper teams. They completed the exercise without being detected and having successfully accomplished every aspect of their mission. When Williams arrived at their position for the final evaluation, Sarah could see approval in his weathered features. "Congratulations," he said as they packed up their equipment. "You've successfully completed advanced sniper school. You're now qualified to serve with any special operations unit in the military." That evening, there was a small graduation ceremony attended by the base commander and several senior officers. Sarah stood with the 15 other students who had successfully completed the program, out of the original class of 20. The attrition rate was typical for such demanding training, but it served as a reminder of how difficult it was to achieve this level of qualification. As she received her graduation certificate, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young girl hunting in the mountains of Oregon to a qualified military sniper, every step had been building toward this achievement. But she also understood that graduation was just the beginning. The real test would come when she was deployed with an operational unit, where the skills she had learned would be applied in life and death situations. Master Sergeant Williams approached her after the ceremony, carrying an envelope that contained her next assignment. Sarah opened it with curiosity, wondering which unit would be her first operational posting. The orders were for assignment to a Navy SEAL team based on the West Coast. It was an unusual assignment for an Army-trained sniper, but Sarah had learned that exceptional performance sometimes led to unexpected opportunities. The SEALs were known for seeking out the best personnel regardless of their branch of service, and apparently her performance at sniper school had caught their attention. "That's a good assignment," Williams said, noting her expression as she read the orders. "The SEALs don't request personnel lightly. Someone in their organization specifically asked for you based on your performance here." Sarah folded the orders carefully and placed them in her pocket. Tomorrow she would begin the next phase of her military career, working with one of the most elite units in the entire armed forces. The thought was both exciting and intimidating, but she was ready for whatever challenges awaited her. As she packed her belongings that final night at Fort Benning, Sarah reflected on everything she had learned over the past 6 months. The technical skills were important, but the mental discipline and professional confidence she had gained were equally valuable. She had proven to herself and others that she belonged among the military's elite marksmen, and that knowledge would serve her well in whatever missions lay ahead. The next morning, she said goodbye to Morrison and the other graduates who were heading to different assignments around the world. They had formed bonds forged in shared hardship and mutual respect, the kind of relationships that would last throughout their military careers. As her plane lifted off from the airfield at Fort Benning, Sarah looked down at the training grounds where she had spent the most challenging and rewarding months of her life. She was no longer the uncertain recruit trying to prove herself. She was a qualified sniper, ready to serve with the best soldiers in the world. The journey was far from over, but she was prepared for whatever lay ahead. The Naval Amphibious Base Coronado stretched along the Pacific coastline like a fortress dedicated to creating the world's most elite warriors. Sarah stood at the entrance gate, her orders in hand and her gear bag slung over her shoulder, watching groups of sailors and Marines moving with the purposeful intensity that marked all military installations. But there was something different here, an energy that spoke of higher standards and more demanding expectations. The SEAL compound was separate from the main base, accessed through additional security checkpoints that emphasized the secretive nature of the unit's operations. Sarah presented her orders to the guard, who studied them with the kind of careful attention that suggested unauthorized personnel were definitely not welcome. "First time working with the teams, Sergeant?" the guard asked, noting her Army uniform among the predominantly Navy personnel. "Yes," Sarah replied simply. She had learned that brevity was usually the best approach when dealing with unfamiliar military units. "You'll want to report to the operations building," the guard said, pointing toward a nondescript concrete structure. "Someone will meet you there and get you oriented." The operations building was bustling with activity even though it was barely 7 in the morning. Sarah could see personnel moving with the kind of efficient urgency that suggested active mission planning was always underway. Charts and maps covered the walls, and she noticed several computer workstations displaying what appeared to be satellite imagery of various international locations. She approached the reception desk, where a petty officer was coordinating what seemed like a dozen different tasks simultaneously. He looked up from his computer screen as she approached, taking note of her uniform and the sniper qualification badge prominently displayed on her chest. "You must be Sergeant Chen," he said, consulting a clipboard. "Welcome to SEAL Team 7. Commander Hayes is expecting you." Commander Hayes was a man in his early 40s who carried himself with the quiet confidence that marked all successful special operations officers. His office was spartanly decorated, containing only the essential furniture and a few framed photographs showing various military operations. When Sarah knocked on his open door, he looked up from a stack of mission briefings and gestured for her to enter. "Sergeant Chen, please have a seat," he said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, and his gray eyes assessed her with the kind of professional evaluation that was neither friendly nor hostile, simply thorough. "Thank you for having me, sir," Sarah replied as she settled into the chair across from his desk. "I requested you specifically based on your performance at Fort Benning," Hayes said without preamble. "Master Sergeant Williams speaks very highly of your abilities, and we have a particular need for someone with your skill set." Sarah listened without interrupting, understanding that this conversation would determine how she would be integrated into the team. "We operate differently here than what you're probably used to in the Army," Hayes continued. "Our missions require flexibility, innovation, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Every member of this team is expected to contribute their expertise while also being ready to take on roles outside their primary specialty when the mission requires it." "I understand, sir," Sarah said. "Do you?" Hayes asked, leaning back in his chair. "Because I want to be very clear about something. You're here because you're the best available person for certain types of missions, not because we're trying to make any kind of statement about gender integration. When we're deployed, there are no special considerations, no modified standards, and no room for anything less than complete professional competence." Sarah appreciated his directness. She had dealt with enough well-meaning but misguided attempts at special treatment to understand the value of clear expectations. "That's exactly how I prefer to operate, sir," she replied. Hayes nodded approvingly. "Good. Your first assignment will be working with Alpha Squad. They're currently between deployments, which gives you time to integrate with the team and familiarize yourself with our procedures. The squad leader is Lieutenant Commander Jackson, and he'll be responsible for your tactical integration." After the meeting with Commander Hayes, Sarah was escorted to the team area where she would be working. The space was organized around function rather than ceremony, with equipment storage areas, briefing rooms, and planning spaces that spoke of an organization focused entirely on operational effectiveness. Lieutenant Commander Jackson was a compact man with the kind of weathered features that suggested extensive overseas deployments. He was examining a rifle when Sarah was introduced to him, and she could see immediately that he was the kind of professional who evaluated people based on competence rather than preconceptions. "Sergeant Chen, welcome to Alpha Squad," he said, setting down the rifle and extending his hand. "I've read your file, and I'm impressed by your qualifications. How much experience do you have with maritime operations?" "Very little, sir," Sarah admitted honestly. "My training has been primarily focused on land-based operations." "That's what I expected," Jackson replied. "We'll need to get you qualified in diving, small boat operations, and amphibious insertion techniques. But first, I want to see how you integrate with the rest of the team." He led her to a nearby conference room where the other members of Alpha Squad were conducting mission planning for an upcoming training exercise. Sarah counted 8 men, all in their 20s or 30s, all carrying themselves with the quiet professionalism that marked elite soldiers. "Gentlemen," Jackson announced, "this is Sergeant Chen, our new sniper. She'll be working with us starting immediately." The introductions were brief but cordial. Sarah could sense the same professional evaluation that she had experienced throughout her military career, but there was also genuine curiosity about her capabilities. These were men who understood the value of expert marksmanship, and they were eager to see what she could contribute to the team. Petty Officer First Class Martinez, the team's communications specialist, was the first to engage her in conversation about her background. He had noticed her sniper badge and wanted to know about her training and experience. "Fort Benning, huh?" he said as they examined maps of the upcoming training area. "That's supposed to be pretty tough schooling." "It was challenging," Sarah replied diplomatically. "What's your effective range with the .308, asked Chief Petty Officer Williams, the team's senior enlisted member and weapons specialist. "Depends on conditions, but I'm comfortable out to 800 meters with the right equipment," Sarah said. Williams nodded approvingly. "That'll work well for our typical mission profiles. Most of our overwatch positions are in the 400 to 600 meter range anyway." The conversation continued as they discussed the upcoming training exercise, which would involve a simulated hostage rescue scenario at a mock facility constructed on San Clemente Island. Sarah would be responsible for providing sniper overwatch while the rest of the team conducted the assault phase of the operation. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into learning the unique aspects of SEAL operations. The physical demands were intense, but not significantly different from what she had experienced in Army training. What was different was the emphasis on maritime skills and the integration of multiple types of operations within single missions. She spent hours in the diving pool, learning to use scuba equipment and practicing underwater navigation. Her previous swimming experience helped, but the technical aspects of military diving required careful study and practice. The instructors were demanding but patient, recognizing that her land-based expertise was valuable even if her maritime skills needed development. Small boat operations presented their own challenges. Sarah had to learn to handle high-speed boats in various sea conditions while maintaining the ability to transition immediately to land-based operations. The boats were fast and maneuverable, but they required a different kind of spatial awareness than anything she had experienced before. But it was the weapons training that really captured her attention. The SEALs used a wider variety of firearms than she had encountered in Army service, and many of them were configured specifically for maritime environments. She spent hours learning the characteristics of different rifle and pistol systems, understanding how saltwater and sand could affect their performance, and practicing maintenance procedures that would keep them operational under adverse conditions. Petty Officer Martinez became her primary guide through the technical aspects of SEAL operations. He was a career Navy man with multiple deployments and extensive experience in the kind of complex missions that define special operations. More importantly, he was an excellent teacher who understood how to explain new concepts in ways that built on existing knowledge. The key thing to understand about our operations, he explained during one training session, is that we often have to transition between different types of environments very quickly. You might start a mission underwater, move to a land-based infiltration, and then provide sniper support for an assault team. Flexibility is more important than perfect specialization. Sarah found this approach refreshing after the more rigid structure of Army operations. The SEALs seemed to encourage innovation and adaptation, rewarding personnel who could find creative solutions to tactical problems rather than simply following established procedures. Her first field training exercise with Alpha Squad took place 3 weeks after her arrival at Coronado. The scenario involved infiltrating San Clemente Island by submarine, conducting reconnaissance of a terrorist facility, and then executing a coordinated assault to rescue hostages and capture high-value targets. Sarah's role was to provide sniper overwatch from a position approximately 600 meters from the target facility. She would be inserted with the rest of the team, but would separate from them to establish her position while they moved into assault positions around the building. The submarine insertion was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. The vessel approached the island underwater, surfacing only long enough to deploy the team in small boats. Sarah found herself moving through dark water toward an even darker coastline, relying entirely on the navigation skills of the boat crew to reach the correct landing point. The transition from water to land was smooth but required careful attention to equipment management. Sarah had to ensure that her rifle system remained completely dry while also maintaining all her other equipment in operational condition. The team moved inland with the kind of silent coordination that spoke of extensive training and mutual trust. Sarah separated from the main group approximately 1 kilometer from the target, moving through rough terrain to reach her designated overwatch position. The approach required careful route planning to avoid detection while also ensuring that she would have clear fields of fire once she reached her position. Her overwatch position was a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility of the target facility while offering good concealment from ground observation. Sarah spent nearly an hour carefully preparing her position, arranging camouflage and equipment to minimize her signature while maximizing her effectiveness. Through her rifle scope, she could observe the entire target area with perfect clarity. The mock facility was realistically constructed, with multiple buildings and defensive positions that would challenge the assault team. Sarah identified several potential threat locations and prepared range cards that would allow her to engage targets quickly and accurately if the situation required it. The assault began at dawn, with Alpha Squad moving simultaneously from 3 different directions. Sarah watched through her scope as they approached their breach points, maintaining continuous surveillance for threats that might compromise the operation. Halfway through the assault phase, opposing force instructors introduced a complication by having simulated terrorists appear on the roof of the main building. They were positioned to engage the assault team as it moved through the compound, and their location made them difficult for the ground-based SEALs to address effectively. Sarah identified the threat immediately and transmitted the information to Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Without waiting for specific instructions, she engaged the targets with precise rifle fire, neutralizing the threat before it could affect the assault team's movement. "Outstanding work, Chen," Jackson's voice crackled through her earpiece. Target eliminated, continue overwatch. The exercise continued for another hour, with Sarah providing continuous support to the assault team while maintaining security for her own position. When the scenario concluded, she had engaged 4 separate targets at ranges between 400 and 700 meters, achieving hits on all of them. During the debriefing that followed, the exercise controllers specifically praised Sarah's performance and her integration with the team. More importantly, Lieutenant Commander Jackson made it clear that her contribution had been essential to the success of the mission. That rooftop threat could have been a real problem, he said as the team reviewed their performance. Chen identified it quickly and neutralized it before it became an issue. That's exactly the kind of support we need from our sniper. Chief Williams was even more direct in his assessment. Best shooting I've seen in 15 years of doing these exercises, he said simply. Over the following weeks, Sarah participated in increasingly complex training scenarios that tested every aspect of her new skills. She learned to operate from maritime platforms, providing sniper support for teams conducting shipboarding operations. She practiced urban operations, learning to function effectively in city environments where traditional military tactics had to be adapted for close-quarters situations. But, perhaps most importantly, she learned to function as an integral member of a small team where every person's contribution was essential to mission success. The SEALs operated with a level of mutual dependence that was different from anything she had experienced in larger military units, and this required a different kind of professional relationship with her teammates. One evening, as the team was conducting equipment maintenance after a particularly challenging training exercise, Petty Officer Martinez approached Sarah with a serious expression on his face. "Chun, can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Sure," Sarah replied, looking up from the rifle she was cleaning. "How do you deal with the pressure of knowing that people's lives depend on your shooting?" Martinez asked. "I mean, when we're deployed for real, if you miss a shot, people on our team could die." Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. It was the kind of thing that she had thought about extensively during her training, but hearing it expressed so directly made it seem more immediate. "I think about it every time I practice," she said finally. "Every shot I take in training is preparation for the one that might really matter. The pressure doesn't go away, but I try to use it to make myself better." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "I've been wondering about that. You always seem so calm when you're shooting, even under stress. That's not something you can fake." "My father taught me that stress is just another environmental factor to account for," Sarah replied. "Like wind or humidity. You can't eliminate it, but you can learn to work with it." The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics that ranged from technical shooting techniques to the psychological aspects of combat operations. Sarah realized that her teammates were genuinely interested in understanding her approach to her specialty, not out of curiosity but because they wanted to understand how to work with her most effectively. As autumn turned to winter, Alpha Squad's training intensified in preparation for an upcoming deployment. The exact details of their mission remained classified, but Sarah could tell from the nature of their preparation that they would be operating in a maritime environment with significant urban components. The training scenarios became more realistic and more demanding. Sarah found herself operating in conditions that tested every skill she had developed, from basic marksmanship to complex mission planning. The team functioned with increasing smoothness, developing the kind of professional cohesion that would be essential during actual operations. One particularly challenging exercise required Alpha Squad to infiltrate a defended harbor, neutralize security forces, and capture a high-value target from a yacht anchored in the bay. Sarah's role was to provide overwatch from a building overlooking the harbor while the rest of the team conducted the maritime assault. The approach to her overwatch position required her to move through a simulated city environment while avoiding detection by opposing force patrols. She had to navigate unfamiliar streets, breach security measures, and establish her position in a multi-story building without alerting anyone to her presence. Once in position, Sarah maintained surveillance of the target area while the rest of Alpha Squad approached in small boats. The scenario included multiple complications, including opposing force snipers in other buildings and security personnel on patrol boats in the harbor. When the assault began, Sarah found herself engaged in a complex shooting scenario that required her to neutralize multiple threats while avoiding detection by other hostile forces. She engaged targets on boats, in buildings, and on the yacht itself, providing the kind of precise supporting fire that allowed the assault team to complete their mission successfully. The exercise concluded with the successful capture of the high-value target and the extraction of the entire team without casualties. During the debriefing, the exercise controllers noted that Sarah's performance had been exceptional, but, more importantly, her integration with the team had reached the level where she was functioning as a seamless part of the unit rather than an attached specialist. 2 weeks later, Alpha Squad received orders for their first operational deployment with Sarah as part of the team. The mission would take them to the Middle East, where they would be tasked with supporting ongoing counter-terrorism operations in a maritime environment. As Sarah packed her equipment for deployment, she reflected on how much her life had changed since joining the SEALs. She had developed new skills, formed new professional relationships, and gained confidence in her ability to operate effectively in the most demanding military environments. But she also understood that everything she had done so far was preparation for the real test that awaited her overseas. Combat operations would demand every skill she had learned and every lesson she had absorbed during her training. The stakes would be higher than anything she had experienced before, and there would be no room for error. The night before their departure, Lieutenant Commander Jackson called the team together for a final briefing. He reviewed their mission parameters and emphasized the importance of their upcoming deployment, but his final words were directed specifically at Sarah. "Chen, you've proven yourself during training, and I'm confident in your abilities," he said. "But remember that combat operations are different from anything you've experienced before. Trust your training, trust your teammates, and trust yourself. We're all counting on each other to bring everyone home safely." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that came with her position on the team. She was no longer just proving herself or learning new skills. She was now a fully operational member of one of the military's most elite units, and lives would depend on her performance. As she lay in her bunk that final night, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From her childhood in Oregon to sniper school to SEAL training, every experience had been building toward this moment. Tomorrow she would begin her first combat deployment, where all of her training and preparation would be put to the ultimate test. The challenge was daunting, but Sarah was ready. She had the skills, the training, and the support of her teammates. Most importantly, she had the confidence that came from knowing she had earned her place among the military's elite through dedication, competence, and unwavering commitment to excellence. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it as a professional warrior, ready to serve her country and support her teammates with the same precision and dedication that had marked every phase of her military career. The Mediterranean sun blazed down on the forward operating base as Alpha Squad conducted final equipment checks before their mission briefing. Sarah adjusted her rifle scope one last time, running through the mechanical precision that had become second nature over months of training and preparation. Around her, the other team members moved with the quiet efficiency that marked professional soldiers preparing for combat operations. The mission briefing took place in a secure conference room where maps and satellite imagery covered every available wall surface. Lieutenant Commander Jackson stood at the front of the room, pointing to aerial photographs of a coastal compound where intelligence suggested a high-value terrorist target was currently located. "Our primary objective is the capture of Ahmad Hassan, a senior logistics coordinator for several terrorist organizations operating in this region," Jackson explained, his voice calm and professional despite the gravity of the situation. "Secondary objectives include gathering intelligence about future operations and disrupting the network's financial infrastructure." Sarah studied the imagery carefully, noting the tactical challenges the compound presented. The target structure was situated on a rocky coastline, surrounded by open ground that would make approach difficult. Multiple buildings within the compound provided numerous potential hiding places for hostile forces, and the proximity to civilian areas meant that any engagement would have to be conducted with extreme precision. "Chen, your position will be here," Jackson continued, pointing to a ridgeline approximately 800 meters from the target compound. "You'll provide overwatch for the assault team and be prepared to engage any threats that compromise the operation. The approach to your position requires a 2-kilometer movement through difficult terrain, and you'll need to be in place before the rest of the team begins their infiltration." Sarah nodded, already beginning to plan her route and equipment requirements. The distance to the target was at the outer edge of her preferred engagement range, but well within her capabilities. More concerning was the approach route, which would require her to move through an area where local civilians might be present. "What's the civilian activity in the area?" she asked, studying the map carefully. "Intelligence suggests minimal activity during our planned time frame," Jackson replied. "But you'll need to be prepared for unexpected encounters. Rules of engagement are strict, positive identification is required before any engagement, and civilian casualties are absolutely unacceptable." The briefing continued for another hour, covering communication protocols, extraction procedures, and contingency plans for various scenarios that might develop during the operation. Sarah absorbed every detail, understanding that her teammates' lives might depend on information that seemed insignificant now but could become crucial during the actual mission. After the briefing, Chief Williams approached Sarah with additional intelligence about the specific weapons systems and defensive measures they might encounter at the target location. Local sources suggest that the compound has at least 2 trained snipers providing security, he explained, showing her additional photographs that highlighted potential firing positions. They're reportedly using older Soviet bloc equipment, but they know the terrain and have had time to prepare their positions. Sarah studied the photographs with professional interest, noting the angles and sightlines that opposing snipers might use. Counter-sniper operations were among the most challenging aspects of her specialty, requiring her to identify and neutralize trained adversaries who were actively hunting for her as well. Any information about their training level or experience, she asked. Unknown, Williams replied honestly. But we have to assume they're competent until proven otherwise. Your position gives you good fields of fire, but it also means you'll be exposed to counterfire if they spot you. That evening, Sarah spent hours studying the terrain maps and satellite imagery, memorizing every detail of the area where she would be operating. She planned multiple approach routes to her overwatch position, identified potential escape routes if her position was compromised, and calculated range and wind corrections for every possible target area within the compound. Her equipment preparation was equally meticulous. She checked and rechecked every component of her rifle system, ensuring that each element was perfectly adjusted and thoroughly clean. Her ammunition was hand-selected for consistency, and she prepared range cards that would allow her to engage targets quickly and accurately under stress. The operation began before dawn, with Alpha Squad departing the base in small boats that would carry them to an isolated beach approximately 5 kilometers from the target compound. The sea was calm, and the boats moved through the water with minimal noise, their engines muffled to avoid detection by coastal patrols. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and calm focus that preceded combat operations. Her training had prepared her for this moment, but she understood that real combat would present challenges that no training exercise could fully replicate. The weight of responsibility was significant. Her teammates would be depending on her accuracy and judgment during the most critical moments of their mission. The landing was executed flawlessly, with the team moving quickly from the boats to concealed positions on the beach. Sarah separated from the main group immediately, beginning her solo movement toward the overwatch position while the rest of Alpha Squad prepared for their own infiltration route. The approach to her position required careful navigation through rocky terrain that offered both concealment and significant obstacles to movement. Sarah moved slowly and deliberately, testing each foothold and constantly scanning for signs of enemy activity or civilian presence. Her progress was measured in meters rather than kilometers, but speed was less important than remaining undetected. After 2 hours of careful movement, Sarah reached her designated overwatch position on the ridgeline overlooking the target compound. The location offered excellent visibility of the entire target area while providing good concealment from ground observation. She spent another hour preparing her position, arranging camouflage and equipment to minimize her signature while maximizing her effectiveness. Through her rifle scope, the compound appeared peaceful in the early morning light. Sarah could see several buildings within the perimeter walls, including what intelligence had identified as the main residence where the target was believed to be located. Gardens and courtyards provided areas where hostile forces might be concealed, and she noted several positions that would be ideal for defensive snipers. Her earpiece crackled softly as Lieutenant Commander Jackson's voice provided a status update from the assault team's position. Overwatch, this is Alpha Leader. We're in position and beginning final approach. Estimated time to breach is 15 minutes. Report any activity in your sector. Alpha Leader, Overwatch, Sarah replied quietly. Compound appears quiet. No visible activity at this time. Continuing observation. Sarah settled into the patient vigilance that defines sniper operations, maintaining continuous surveillance while remaining ready to engage targets instantly if the situation required it. Through her scope, she could see details of the compound that weren't visible in the satellite imagery, clotheslines, vehicle tracks, and other signs of recent human activity that suggested the intelligence about the target's presence was accurate. 10 minutes before the scheduled assault, Sarah detected movement on the roof of one of the secondary buildings within the compound. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving carefully along the roofline, carrying what appeared to be a rifle. The person was attempting to remain concealed, but their movement pattern and equipment clearly identified them as a hostile sniper taking position to engage the approaching assault team. Alpha Leader, Overwatch, Sarah transmitted quietly. I have eyes on hostile sniper, secondary building, northwest corner of compound. Target is armed and positioning for engagement. Request permission to engage. Overwatch, Alpha Leader, Jackson's voice was calm and professional. You have permission to engage hostile sniper. Take the shot. Sarah adjusted her scope settings for the precise range to the target, accounting for the slight crosswind that had developed since she established her position. The hostile sniper was approximately 750 meters away, partially concealed behind roofline equipment but presenting a clear target to her elevated position. She controlled her breathing, finding the natural pause between heartbeats where her body was completely still. The crosshairs settled exactly where she wanted them, and her trigger squeeze was smooth and controlled. The shot echoed across the landscape, and, through her scope, Sarah saw the hostile sniper collapse immediately. Alpha Leader, Overwatch. Hostile sniper neutralized. Outstanding shooting, Overwatch. Continue surveillance. The assault began moments later, with Alpha Squad breaching the compound walls simultaneously from two different directions. Sarah watched through her scope as her teammates moved through the compound with professional efficiency, clearing buildings and securing areas with the kind of coordinated precision that marked elite military units. As the assault progressed, Sarah identified and engaged two additional threats that appeared in positions where they could compromise the team's movement. Both targets were neutralized before they could effectively engage Alpha Squad, and the assault continued without casualties to the friendly forces. The operation culminated with the successful capture of the high-value target, who was taken into custody without resistance once the compound was secure. Intelligence materials and electronic equipment were also seized, providing valuable information about terrorist networks operating throughout the region. Overwatch, Alpha Leader, Jackson's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Primary objective secured. Prepare for extraction. Sarah began packing her equipment, maintaining surveillance until the assault team was ready to begin their withdrawal from the compound. The extraction was conducted with the same professional efficiency as the assault, with Alpha Squad moving quickly but carefully toward their designated pickup point. The boat ride back to base was quiet, with team members conducting immediate after-action reviews and equipment checks. Sarah cleaned her rifle thoroughly, ensuring that it would be ready for immediate use if another mission developed. But she also took time to process what had just occurred, her first combat engagement as part of an elite special operations unit. The formal debriefing took place 6 hours after the team returned to base, with intelligence officers and senior commanders reviewing every aspect of the operation. Sarah's performance was specifically highlighted, with particular attention paid to her identification and neutralization of threats that could have compromised the mission. Sergeant Chen's marksmanship was exceptional, Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported to the assembled officers. She identified and neutralized 3 separate threats at ranges between 600 and 800 meters, under real combat conditions, while maintaining continuous overwatch for the assault team. Her performance was exactly what we expect from our sniper specialists. The mission's success led to immediate tasking for additional operations, as intelligence gained from the captured materials revealed information about other high-value targets in the region. Alpha Squad was assigned to a follow-up mission that would take place within 72 hours, requiring rapid preparation and planning. Over the next 6 months, Sarah participated in 15 separate combat operations with Alpha Squad, each presenting unique challenges and requirements. She engaged targets in urban environments, provided overwatch for maritime operations, and conducted reconnaissance missions that required her to operate independently for extended periods. Her reputation within the special operations community grew with each successful mission. Word spread about the Army sniper who had integrated seamlessly with the SEAL team and consistently delivered exceptional performance under the most demanding conditions. But, more importantly, she had earned the complete trust and respect of her teammates, who knew they could depend on her accuracy and judgment during the most critical moments. The mission that would ultimately define Sarah's military career came during her 8th month of deployment. Intelligence had identified a terrorist leader who was planning a major attack against civilian targets in Europe. The target was known to be extremely security conscious and surrounded by well-trained bodyguards, but he was scheduled to attend a meeting at a remote compound where an operation might be feasible. The tactical situation was extraordinarily challenging. The compound was located in mountainous terrain that limited approach routes and provided numerous defensive advantages for the hostile forces. Intelligence suggested that the target would be protected by at least 20 armed guards, including several with military training and experience. Sarah's role would be to provide sniper overwatch from a position more than 1,000 meters from the target compound, at the very limit of her equipment's effective range and far beyond what most military snipers would consider a reasonable engagement distance. The shot would require perfect conditions, flawless equipment performance, and absolute precision in execution. The approach to her firing position required a solo movement of more than 8 kilometers through hostile territory, with no support available if she encountered enemy forces or experienced equipment problems. She would need to establish her position and remain undetected for potentially up to 18 hours before the target appeared. Lieutenant Commander Jackson reviewed the mission parameters with Sarah personally, ensuring that she understood both the importance of the operation and the extreme challenges it presented. "This is the most difficult shot we've ever asked anyone to attempt," he said directly. "The range is at the absolute limit of what's possible, and you'll be operating completely alone in hostile territory. If you have any doubts about your ability to make this shot, now is the time to say so." Sarah considered the technical challenges carefully before responding. The range was indeed extreme, requiring her to account for numerous environmental factors that became more significant at such distances. Wind, temperature, humidity, and even the curvature of the earth would all affect the bullet's trajectory. "Sir, I can make the shot," she said with quiet confidence. "The conditions will have to be favorable, and I'll need time to properly prepare the position, but it's within my capabilities." "I believe you can do it too," Jackson replied. "But remember that this is about more than just marksmanship. This target has been responsible for multiple terrorist attacks that killed hundreds of innocent people. Taking him out could prevent future attacks and save countless lives." The weight of that responsibility stayed with Sarah as she prepared for the mission. This wasn't just about proving her skills or completing a difficult assignment, it was about using her abilities to protect innocent people from someone who had dedicated his life to causing harm and suffering. The infiltration began before midnight, with Sarah moving alone through mountainous terrain toward her designated firing position. The movement was physically demanding, requiring her to navigate rocky slopes and dense vegetation while carrying all the equipment she would need for an extended solo operation. She reached her position as the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, giving her several hours to prepare her firing solution before the target was expected to arrive. The location offered an unobstructed view of the compound below, but the extreme range meant that her target would appear impossibly small through her rifle scope. Sarah spent hours studying the environmental conditions, measuring wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, calculating temperature and humidity effects, and preparing range cards that accounted for every variable that might affect her shot. The mathematics were complex, but she had trained for exactly this type of scenario. Through her scope, the compound appeared peaceful throughout the morning hours. Sarah maintained patient surveillance, watching for any signs of the target's arrival while remaining completely motionless to avoid detection. Her camouflage was perfect, blending her into the rocky terrain so effectively that she would be invisible to observers even at much closer range. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, activity in the compound increased dramatically. Vehicles arrived carrying security personnel, and Sarah could see armed guards taking positions around the perimeter. Through her scope, she watched as additional security measures were implemented, confirming that a high-value individual was expected. The target arrived in an armored vehicle escorted by 2 additional security cars. Sarah watched through her scope as a man matching the intelligence photographs emerged from the vehicle and walked toward the main building within the compound. The range to target was 1,247 meters according to her calculations, an extraordinary distance for a precision rifle shot. "Alpha Leader, Overwatch," Sarah transmitted quietly. "I have positive identification of primary target. Target is moving toward main building. Preparing to engage. Overwatch, Alpha Leader. You are authorized to engage primary target. Take the shot when ready." Sarah made final adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the precise environmental conditions at that moment. The wind was relatively calm, which was favorable for such an extreme range shot. Temperature and humidity were within acceptable parameters. Everything that could be calculated and prepared had been accounted for. The target paused outside the main building, speaking with one of his security personnel. For a brief moment, he presented a clear target profile that would allow Sarah to engage without risk to other individuals in the area. Sarah controlled her breathing and found that perfect moment of stillness that her father had taught her to recognize decades earlier in the mountains of Oregon. The crosshairs settled exactly where she needed them, and her trigger squeeze was smooth and controlled. The shot echoed across the mountainous landscape, and Sarah watched through her scope as the bullet traveled its impossible trajectory across more than a kilometer of distance. The flight time seemed eternal, but she knew from her calculations that it would be less than 2 seconds. The bullet struck exactly where she had aimed, and the target collapsed immediately. The extreme range meant that the sound of the shot wouldn't reach the compound for several seconds, giving Sarah precious time to begin her extraction before the security forces realized what had happened. Alpha Leader, Overwatch. Primary target neutralized. Beginning extraction. Sarah packed her equipment quickly but methodically, ensuring that nothing was left behind that could identify her or compromise the operation. By the time the security forces in the compound realized their principal had been shot by a sniper, she was already moving away from her firing position toward her extraction point. The extraction was completed without incident, and Sarah rejoined Alpha Squad at a forward staging area where they conducted immediate debriefing and prepared for rapid departure from the area. The mission was declared a complete success, with the elimination of a high-value terrorist target accomplished without any friendly casualties or compromise to the unit. The aftermath of the mission brought Sarah to the attention of the highest levels of military command. The extreme-range shot under combat conditions was recognized as one of the most difficult sniper engagements ever successfully completed, and her performance throughout the deployment had established her as one of the most capable precision marksmen in the entire special operations community. But perhaps more meaningful to Sarah was the recognition she received from her teammates and peers within Alpha Squad. These were professionals who had seen combat operations around the world, and their respect was based entirely on proven competence under the most demanding conditions. 6 months later, Sarah received orders for her next assignment, instructor duty at the Advanced Sniper School at Fort Benning, where she would be responsible for training the next generation of military marksmen. The assignment represented recognition of her expertise and a chance to share the knowledge and experience she had gained through years of training and combat operations. On her final day with Alpha Squad, Lieutenant Commander Jackson presented her with a letter of commendation signed by the Commanding Admiral of Naval Special Warfare Command. But his personal comments meant more to Sarah than any official recognition. "Sergeant Chen, you've been an honor to serve with," he said as the team gathered for her departure ceremony. "You've proven that excellence has no boundaries, and you've set a standard that will inspire others for years to come. You'll always be part of this team, regardless of where your career takes you." As Sarah prepared to leave Coronado, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small town in Oregon to service with one of the world's most elite military units. Every challenge had been an opportunity to grow stronger and more capable. Every setback had been a lesson in perseverance and determination. But, perhaps most importantly, she had learned that true professional respect was earned through competence, dedication, and the willingness to serve something larger than oneself. The gender barriers that had seemed so significant early in her career had simply dissolved in the face of proven performance and unwavering commitment to excellence. The final image that would remain with Sarah was the sight of her teammates standing at attention as her departure vehicle pulled away from the SEAL compound. These men had accepted her not because of her gender or in spite of it, but because she had proven herself worthy of their trust and respect through her actions and achievements. No insignia on her uniform identified her as female. No special designation marked her as different from any other qualified sniper. But, when Commander Hayes rendered a final salute as her vehicle departed, it was a recognition of something more profound than technical expertise or military achievement. It was recognition of a warrior who had earned her place among the best through dedication, courage, and an unwavering commitment to excellence that transcended any artificial barriers others might have imposed. Sarah's story would continue, carrying forward the lessons learned and the confidence gained through years of proving herself in the most demanding environments imaginable. But the foundation had been established. She was not just a female sniper or a token representative breaking barriers. She was simply one of the best at what she did, worthy of respect and recognition based on merit alone. The military had given her the opportunity to serve at the highest levels of professional competence. In return, she had demonstrated that excellence recognizes no boundaries, and that the only limitations that truly matter are those we place on ourselves. Her journey was far from over, but she faced whatever lay ahead with the confidence that comes from knowing she had already proven herself capable of achieving anything she was determined to accomplish.